Okay, we're going to call the study session of January 7th, 2019 to order. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If we could have roll call, please.
Councilpersons Breeding.
Present.
Higgins.
Present.
Kelsey.
Here.
Parkinson.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Salcido.
Present.
And Mayor Carnes.
Present, here. We will do both. Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Purpose of this meeting is a study session to discuss the road bond project that was approved by voters in 2013. So, as you recall, folks that are out there, this was a $20 million bond proposal that was to be used for our roads. It passed by, I think, 56, 57 percentage points in the November 2013 election. Shortly after that, or during that, our finances went into a tank. We lost our bond rating, and we weren't able to secure loans, or it wasn't cost effective for us to make those repairs. As you may know, or do know if you travel through our roads, there are some that are in pretty poor shape. And to bring them all to good shape, it was estimated to be over $100 million. And at the point where we were putting just under $2 million a year, which was all that we can afford to, into our roadway, it's going to take a period of time before we get those repairs in order. So I think that we will start this off with our City Bond Council. Would that be a good, so that would be Steve Mann. All right.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Steve
After you,
Mann from
thank you.
Miller Canfield.
But as we go through this, I mean, it's been 5, almost 6 years now. Could you touch on why we would be doing this now? And if this was approved 5 years ago?
Correct.
And if the vote that was taken 5.5 years ago is still going to be effective for us?
Yes, certainly. And actually, the prior year, in 2012, the city had went out with a little larger proposal, a $30 million bond issue, $30 million bond issue, which the voters did not approve. So that the city, working with its engineers and financial advisor and bond counsel, regrouped and came back the next year in 2013 with a $20 million bond proposal with a 10-year limit on each series of bonds. With the voters' approval, that approval does not expire. That's valid approval for the city council to move forward based on that and issue the bonds when it sees fit, within the parameters that were in the resolution, which are, again, $20 million to be broken out in multiple series as council sees fit, with each series not exceeding 10-year term. Okay. Happy to answer any more questions on the specifics, the legalities, the proceedings council would have to undertake to issue the bonds, and I'm sure you'll want to hear from Mr. Benzinski and his colleague, Stephen Hayduck from Benzinski and Company as well, on the financial side.
Well, can you give us a synopsis of the financial side, or the overview from your perspective?
Well, that'd be more for Mr. Benzinski, I think, the financial side. I can speak to the bond process, and with the process, it started in 2013 with the voters approving the ballot proposal. The next step, when the city decides it wants to go out and issue the first series of bonds, would be to determine the size of that bond issue, and Mr. Benzinski has done some preliminary work on the schedule for 3 series. When the city and its engineer are comfortable that we're ready to go out and bid the project, once we have the bids in hand, then we'll start the bond issuance process, and that would start with us as bond council coming back to the city council with a resolution authorizing the issuance of the first series of bonds. That's anticipated currently to be, what's the first series amount? 6.7? $6.7 million. So we'd have a resolution for you. Yes, sir.
Question for you, because our bond rating is still not, because we're attempting to get that done, and Mr. Copper has done a lot of work for us to
Right.
have us have a bond rating. So
Yep.
how can we proceed without that bond rating?
Yep, that's a great question, and I'll defer again a little bit
Oh, okay.
to Benzinski for the financial side and the credit worthiness and rating side of things. But you can issue bonds as long as you can find a purchaser without a rating, and that's done pretty regularly these days as well. But just finishing up on the process, we'd bring a resolution to council to authorize the first series around 6.7 million or whatever the number is that the city and your engineers determine is accurate. And that resolution would authorize Mr. Kopler, yourself, and the clerk to move forward in selling the bonds in probably a private placement scenario where the financial advisor would assist you in finding a purchaser for the bonds. And that would be the only action of City Council, actually. After you approve that resolution, we'd take care of the rest of the work, preparing the actual bonds, the closing documents, all of that, which you would execute along with Mr. Kopler and your clerk. And then they'd be delivered to the purchaser in return for the bond amount, 6.7 million or whatever that final amount is. Okay, and that first series would be used, the proceeds would be used to pay for your 2019 construction and your 2020 construction, and probably some design and engineering for 2021. And we come back in 2021 and do the second series of bonds. Okay. Mr. Benzinski can probably answer more of your questions as far as the financials, the millage impact, and the credit rating and sale of the bonds.
Okay, well, why don't we do the overview? We'll have our, is it Benzinski?
That's correct.
If you can come up, and then we'll then go into questions from council
Absolutely.
after that, as soon as we get the whole picture here.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve, and good evening, Mayor, council members, city manager. As Mr. Mann has indicated that this ballot was approved, the market tanked, your financials tanked, and we were unable to issue bonds. The good thing is that over that time frame, in addition to you being in a better situation financially, the financial institutions are looking at credits differently. There are banks and financial institutions that like to purchase bonds that are out there for 10 years or less. And due to the fact that your ballot says you can issue in one or more series, however, you cannot issue any more than 10 years in length. So this is a perfect scenario for what they call as a private placement. A private placement, we would recommend that the city hire a placement agent, which would be a broker-dealer, a firm such as Hilltop Securities, Hilliard Lyons, something like that, that would go out and solicit bids from underwriter or investors, answer any questions that they may have. In this type of financing, you do not need to put together an official statement, which is the major marketing tool. It's a booklet describing, it's called a prospectus in the corporate world. You are not required to get a rating. The state requires that all transactions over 5 million have a rating, but we can ask for a waiver on that, and they will be more than accommodating. And, we don't believe there'll be a problem, so we do not have to secure a rating. And that the fact that these bonds are voted bonds, the city has the authority to levy a tax, whatever it needs, to meet the debt service on the obligations. So whatever your debt service is, you can levy a tax to pay that debt service. It is without limitation as to rate or amount. So investors are always happy to purchase this type of security. Based upon the information that the city manager gave us in late November, early December, we have put together, and that's the schedule that you have in front of you, that shows 3 series of bonds, one in 2019 at 6.7 million, one in 2021 at 6.9 million, and the remainder of 6.4 million to accumulate to $20 million. And we would do it every 2 years. We have assumed a 5% interest rate on rates today, which is, we believe, very conservative. As you may or may not have seen recently, there's been talk that the Fed is probably going to stop pushing interest rates up or trying to push interest rates up. There's been some talk they may even lower them. Again, I can't predict that. If I could, I wouldn't be in Michigan in the winter. So we've used 5%, which we believe is very conservative. We used 5.5 in 2021, which is a guess. I'll be honest with you. We can't predict that. And we've used 6% in 2023. And if you look on the far right-hand column, it shows the millage. And those millage numbers are within the range that were discussed in the ballot proposal that you voted on previously. And as Mr. Mann indicated, if you give us the authority to proceed, we will put together bond specifications so that he can prepare a bond authorizing resolution. We will then secure a broker-dealer to act as your placement agent, and they will confer with us, and we will work with them to get you the lowest interest rate on your bonds. And then we will present to the city the lowest interest rate and make a recommendation to accept or reject that. And then probably 3 weeks later, we will close the transaction and you can start construction.
So if we're not happy with the interest rate after all of this, we can turn this down.
Yes, you can. And we will be there to make a recommendation as to, whether it's acceptable or not. And we will give you some information based upon current market conditions to help you decide as to whether or not it's a good rate or not. Generally, though, we delegate that to either the city manager or the clerk or the treasurer, or one or both, or even the mayor sometimes.
You may have said it already. The process, you come to us with, or we okay this, and then from that time to when the bond is issued, or how long a time?
You would adopt a resolution, my guess would be probably sometime in February. And then we would go out and get bids mid-March and close this transaction early April.
For the construction season that is coming up.
Correct.
2019.
We never advocate selling your bonds too early because you're paying interest on them. You can't reinvest them at the interest rate that you're paying, so it doesn't make sense to sell your bonds early. So we want to tie it as close to when your engineers want to start construction.
Interesting.
Any
Okay,
questions?
Are you
Any
guys ready for, we'll open it up to council?
Sure.
For either Mr. Mann or for Mr. Benzinski, I'm sorry.
Well, I got a question through the chair, if I
Go
may,
ahead,
to you. I guess the total principal and interest, we're going to pay on these bonds over the period of time that we have them out there in the market, estimated like almost over $7 million. Am I correct with what that figure is on the right column all the way on the right-hand side where it says total and principal and interest requirements at the very bottom figure? Am I correct?
Based upon the estimates that we've used, it's
Okay.
$27,631,000 minus the $21 million in principal, so yes.
Yeah, okay. Is that, I don't know, that's almost if I do the figures real quickly, I'm going 20, that's almost a third or 33% interest, though, if you look at it.
No.
Well, if I'm paying something and I'm paying that as interest on a car loan, I'm paying more. That's what I was getting. Is it different in the bond market? Or how do you look at that? Maybe I'm looking
okay,
differently.
the number that I always talk about is that if you borrow money at 6% for 20 years, whatever dollar amount you borrow, whether it's $1 million, you're going to pay $1 million in interest. It doubles at 6%. So here, you're only a third.
Okay. And then, like you said, if we, through the chair again, if we decide to, whatever the interest rate when they come back with us, and we have the right to either accept it or reject it, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that'll be on the, once we accept the interest rate, if they come back and we're happy with the interest rate and all that, we accept, is that locked in, or it's not locked in until we sign the document and they go to purchase the bonds? I mean, sometimes what I'm getting at is that a locked in rate, or that's the rate that they, how can I put this? is that the rate that if we accept it, it's gonna be what the rate we pay for it, I guess is what I'm asking?
We will present an interest rate to you that will be fixed for the duration of the transaction.
All right, that's what I was asking, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further from council?
I guess I have a question through the chair.
Yes, sir. Yes, John, sorry.
This company that would be hired to investigate and to see who they could sell these bonds to, do they get a portion of this? Do they get?
They would get a fee. Yes, they would get a fee. Yes.
And second, when we first went out for these, it was determined that it would probably be, it would take 5 million for the design and engineering alone, and that there really wouldn't be any work that is done during the first letting of this first bond. That's no longer,
Well, we met in early November with the city manager and the director of finance. Our recommendation as municipal advisors to many municipalities across the state, I mean, we've been around since 1976. And we always recommend when you issue bonds in one or more series that you figure out about 2 years of construction and 2.5 years of engineering, because you're always doing your engineering about a year in advance. So you would do engineering for 2019, 20, and 21, and then you would bond for your construction in 19 and 20. Now, we always recommend construction bids, but in a situation like this, you can't bid your 20 work out because no bidder will hold that bid for that duration. But due to the fact that we have 20 million, now if bids come in, we can always move up that 21 sale. If you can't spend it, like this past summer, there was a strike for 75 and 696. If for some reason you couldn't spend it, you have 3 years to spend that money out, and Mr. Mann can explain that more thoroughly than I can, but that's why we try to do the 2 to 2.5 years, because it provides that ability to be flexible.
And we can get into this a little bit more. The other part of this is we have Hennessy engineers here that can talk about what the program would look like. How we kind of laid this out is that the first year, if mayor and council move forward with this, the first year is going to be kind of a smaller project related to the road bond, and we'd be able to use money that we have set aside for road construction in the capital improvement fund to actually start that engineering. So we would be able to do a smaller, and I think it's about a $2 million project the first year. So it wouldn't be that great of an issue. And then we'd be doing the engineering so in that first bond sell, there is money in there for 2 years worth of engineering. And then the next one would have 2 years worth of engineering, and the last one would have 2 years worth of engineering. So it kind of works out to where we have the engineering done in advance of when we're going out to bid.
thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes, sir.
I agree with Councilman Kelsey. I've always had a problem with the interest that we're going to charge on this. When I was on the roads committee in about 97, we went out for a millage. And that millage brought back, we did so many roads a year, and people renewed it every 2 years. When it came up for another renewal, that council at that time wanted a permanent millage, which people didn't go for. So I really think that about a millage for every 2 years would save you a whole lot of interest. Instead of getting $10 million out of 20, you get 20 out of 20 that way. Thank you.
Any more questions for folks? Okay, then turn this over to Hennessy Engineers. And we have John.
Good evening, everyone. The handout that we provided you is, as Mr. Koppler mentioned, the first program in 2019 is meant to basically augment our original program that was approved by council on December 17th. And that was an issuance of 1.7 million, which is, as the mayor referenced, is kind of our typical road projects through there. And then there's a proposal of 2.3 million. And then the following year, on 2020 would be 4.5 million. And that is also in conjunction with a federal aid committee grant that the city was awarded in 2020, which is Riverbrink, which is about $900,000, which will be 85% federally funded through there. So that is to be obligated in 2020. So we've been awarded that, and we are in the process of beginning that work through there. We presented two handouts to you, two drawings. The first one is the proposed 1920 program through there. So what that does is that identifies what was originally approved in December by council in green, and then what are the, my eyes are getting bad here, what's the proposed 2019 road projects, and then in yellow, and the red is the proposed 20 road projects, and then the blue identifies the Federal Aid Committee reconstruction, which is the 900,000 that is federally funded through there. And you can see we've spread the work throughout the community through there. It's about 50-50 between major and local, and it's about 65% of addressing our streets that are in fair to borderline poor conditions, and about 35% reconstruction in kind of round numbers through there. The second handout that you have through there, you can see identifies work that the city has undertaken from essentially really 2015. It identifies it as 2016, but it was initiated in 2015 through there. And to give you an idea about the design cost to get that into a relationship, I think there was 107,000 was the design for 1.7 million. And so that's the rate through there. So you can kind of give you a barometer of where that's at through there. And this is essentially kind of walks us through the initial bond issuance, the first bond issuance through there. I'm here to answer any questions. As you can see, the city's done, over the past, really since 2015, we've done quite a bit of work that historically hadn't been done within the city the years prior to 15, especially since from 08 to 15. It was very, very difficult timing.
Okay, questions from council?
Just a question for John through the chair.
Yeah.
Unless my addition is off, what you presented here is about $8.5 million. Am I correct for the years that you presented? Using the figures of the 1.7 and the 2.7?
Well, the 1.7 is being paid for our Act 51 monies.
Right, but I mean.
Oh, yes,
what we're doing.
accumulative, yes.
Okay.
You're correct.
All right, we're doing that. But yeah, okay, that's Act 51. That doesn't come off the bonds then.
That does not. That
So that's
includes,
kind of, okay.
that includes Act 51 and the FAC 900,000 through there.
What our plan is that if we do follow through with the road bond, it will still be spending about 1.5, 1.6 million a year coming out of the Act 51 as well. So it just, again, it gives us more road work to be done. We may look at a little bit different use of that money because one of the things that we know is going to be very beneficial going down the road is like doing crack sealing. And so we may, use some of that 1.5, 1.6 more towards doing those types of road maintenance projects that will, keep the roads at a higher level.
And create the longevity. What we want to prevent is the structural deterioration of the roadway systems through there, and prevent those roadways that are, as the council may remember, there's a PASER system that we go through the city, which we report to the city every year, and it's a 1 to 10. And those roads that are 5 to 6 are kind of at midlife roads, and if we don't address preventative maintenance through there, they'll deteriorate to a 3 to 4, then a 3 to 2, and then 1 is, just really a unstructured roadway through there. And we get our greatest bang for our buck there and doing that preventative maintenance work through there. And that's always been our goal, is to kind of split it up in that regard, 65% to that type of work and 35% to total reconstruction. So total reconstructions are really the most expensive to do, and you get the least amount of bang for your buck in a sense, but it has to be done when the roadway has no structural integrity.
Anything further from council?
And if I could go again, unless somebody else wants to go, I got a question on, I know you can't answer this, John, but cost, I mean, everything goes up, so is there any kind of contingency, or we're not there yet? In other words, I know concrete goes up, labor costs go up, et cetera, so in the years as we progress, have we, those aren't figured in, right?
We have factored in
You
a
have
cost,
factored- okay.
incremental material cost increase,
Okay, so
around 7%, and it varies from year to year, obviously, you know.
Okay, but there is some cost.
There is,
figured.
yes.
Okay.
The
All
safe-
right. Thank you.
Okay, is there, since we have a moment or two, is there anyone from the audience that wishes to, yes, sir, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Richard Kudrak. The first question I had was, this was supposed to be $20 million for 10 years. If you're going to issue the bonds in 3 different issuances, is each one of the separate issuances going to have a 10-year term, or is it 10 years for all 3 in total? Because that would mean you're not going to pay this off until 14 years. If you, each bond issue gets 10 years.
That is correct, that each bond issue will be 10 years standing on its own. The final maturity would be April of '34. But the law, and I'll let Mr. Mann address it, allows you to do that.
Yeah, the law certainly allows you to do that, and that's what the ballot indicated, that they'd be issued in one or more series as council saw fit. And I think some of the conversations we had years ago when this proposal put together was, you couldn't do $20 million worth of road work in the city in 1 year if you wanted to, or 2 years. So out of necessity, it needs to be stretched out into separate series typically.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anything further?
Oh, yes. I was allowing them, the experts to wade in. I sent you an email one time. We got some new numbers here, but it was $20 million for 10 years, and we factor in $1.7 million that the city's paying now for 10 years, which would be $37 million. What are you going to do for the other $65 million you owe? Because you need $102 million at 2019 dollars. In 10 years, or actually 14 by the time you pay this off, every road in the city has deteriorated even more. And I don't know, is this just a lost cause and we're not really making any solid progress?
This will help us make progress.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, sure, go ahead.
And that really dovetails into our overall capital improvement plan, is to really save those streets that are in midlife crisis, to prevent them from deteriorating through there. When we went to that 102 million number through there, that also assumed that there would not be much work done to those, and those streets would deteriorate very quickly. And the life cycle of a street is it's a slow deterioration up to a certain level, just past its midlife, and then there's an accelerated deterioration, we've all witnessed it, where the streets are actually in pretty good shape for a number of years. They can survive without regular maintenance through there and things like that, but once maintenance, if it is not addressed at some form or fashion, you'll begin to get deterioration. You'll get structural failure around the catch basins, manholes, things like that. You'll begin to get water underneath the base material through there, which begin to heaving, things like through there. And so this will make a substantial dent, though, in preserving the street network within the community. We had tried originally for the 30 million, as Mr. Mann had mentioned through there. But I don't want the public to think that this is not an insignificant improvement. And I think the council and the city managers, they should be commended for what they've done actually since 2015 on. And those in the DPS committee know this, all the work that goes into that and the amount of road work that has been done through there that we've been able to address really by watching our pennies and being very careful in how we approach the projects.
Thanks, sir.
If my math is correct, we're going to do construction for 6 years, but we're going to pay for it for 14. Is there any factor in all this spending money to get the Lamborghini of pothole repair machines to do something with the potholes on the roads that are not going to be touched in this three bond issue?
As I recall, we have a state-of-the-art pothole repairing machine.
Well, if you've got one now, you need two. Thank you so much.
Anything further? Then we'll adjourn the meeting. Do you want to touch?
Yeah, if I could, so the next step from my perspective on this is to engage Hennessy in doing the engineering for the work that would happen as part of this. So my approach would be at the next meeting to bring a resolution to authorize Hennessy to undertake that engineering work on the road program that they just presented to us.
Question through the chair.
Go ahead.
Where's that money going to come from? Because we're not going to put the bonds out yet, so we're just going to pay I mean, how do we pay for
Yeah,
this?
so, and I don't remember what the number was that it was, but it's about 107, wasn't it, somewhere there?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, just, yeah.
I should sit next to these fancy guys. It's approximately, it was 107 for the 1.7 million through there, and this would be 2 million. So it's a little bit over 1.7, but right in that range through there. And obviously, the engineering, that would go forward in the future regardless. It's not, it'd be in the can and be ready to be let out at a different time if, with the bond issuance or without the bond issuance.
And how we looked at it was that we'd be able to use money that's in the CIP for road construction to start that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, then at that, we will adjourn the meeting at, looks like 7:04. Picture time.